The day started like any other for Dean Hargrove, but today he had something different in mind. As the CEO of the massive auto dealership chain Road King Motors, Dean had built an empire from scratch. What started as a tiny used car lot, 25, years ago had become a well-known name across the state. But somewhere along the way, the shine of success made him lose touch with the people on the ground, his employees, the customers, the experience. So Dean came up with an idea. No corporate visit, no suits, no press. Just him, a hoodie, jeans, and a beat-up Ford he borrowed from a buddy. He drove into one of his own dealerships as a regular customer. No one was supposed to recognize him. He wanted to see how things really worked when the boss wasn't watching. It was the mid-sized location out in Glendale. It had decent reviews, but Dean had heard whispers. High-pressure sales, rude behavior, and complaints that never made it up the chain. He parked in the customer lot and stepped out, taking in the scene. Flashy banners flapped in the wind. Sales event. 0% interest, instant approval screamed in bold red letters. As he walked into the showroom, no one greeted him. He stood awkwardly by the front desk for a minute before deciding to just walk around and look at cars. A few salespeople leaned against a desk nearby, sipping coffee, laughing, ignoring him completely. Eventually, a younger salesman with a tired look in his eyes came over. "Hey there. Need help with something?" the guy asked, already sounding defeated. "Yeah," Dean nodded. "Looking for a reliable car, mid-size, not too flashy, just something solid." The salesman, who introduced himself as Marcus, nodded. "All right. Let's take a look around. Budget?" Dean gave him a ballpark figure. Marcus didn't try to upsell him or play games. Instead, he genuinely seemed like he was trying to help. That already told Dean more than he expected. Marcus walked him to a few options, explained the pros and cons, and didn't act pushy at all. But just as Dean was starting to feel maybe things weren't as bad as he thought, he heard it. Two customers had just walked in behind him, an elderly black couple. The woman had a folder with documents in her hand and was holding a small purse tightly. The man had a stiff limp but kept his head high. They were clearly here for business, not browsing. One of the salespeople at the desk, tall, white guy in a sharp blue suit, nudged the other and mumbled, not so quietly, "Here we go, look who's back, credit check special." The other laughed. "Bet they're back to talk it over again. Waste of time." Dean stopped in his tracks. It hit him hard and fast. He couldn't believe what he'd just heard, that tone, that mockery. He turned his head just enough to see the men still chuckling. The elderly couple hadn't heard it, or maybe they were just too used to this kind of treatment. They approached the front desk with hope in their eyes. Dean's heart pounded. All. The success he'd built. If this was the kind of culture festering inside his own walls, then what did it all really mean? He looked back at Marcus, whose jaw was tight. He'd heard it too. Marcus glanced at Dean, then at the couple, then back at his co-workers. Something was brewing behind his eyes. Dean said nothing. Not yet. He wanted to see more. But one thing was already clear. This undercover visit was no longer about checking performance. It had turned into something much deeper. It was time to find out what kind of rot had set in at Road King Motors. Dean stepped back, letting Marcus finish his sentence about the fuel economy of the sedan they were looking at, but his mind had drifted. The words from those salesmen behind him still echoed in his ears like a dirty stain he couldn't scrub off. As he watched the older couple try to get someone's attention, his chest tightened. They looked uncomfortable, unsure of where to go, hesitant to interrupt. One of the suited guys from earlier gave them a fake smile and muttered something under his breath again, but made no move to help. Another salesman literally turned his back. Dean felt his stomach turn. He had grown up poor. His parents had lived paycheck to paycheck. He remembered his dad getting rejected from a dealership because he looked too broke to qualify. Dean. Never forgot that feeling. "Marcus," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," Marcus replied, still focused on the car. "Those two over there, do they come here often?" Marcus hesitated, looked up. "The Harrisons." "Yeah. They've come in 3 times now. Mr. Harrison's a veteran. Got his pension papers. Ready good credit. They just want a fair deal on a compact SUV, but the others, they don't really treat them right." Dean raised a brow. Why not? Marcus looked down. They think it's a waste of time, because they ask questions, because they're older, because they're black, I don't know, doesn't sit right with me though. Dean could tell Marcus was being careful with his words. He probably didn't want to get in trouble. But that last part, doesn't sit right with me, spoke volumes. Dean gave a slow nod. Thanks. You mind if I look around a bit more? On my own? Marcus looked relieved. Sure thing, I'll be over by the front if you need me. Dean wandered across the showroom but kept one eye on the Harrisons. They were now seated awkwardly in a corner. No one had offered them water. No one had taken their documents. Mr. Harrison was thumbing through his folder, while Mrs. Harrison sat stiffly, clutching her purse like it was armor. That's when the second gut punch happened. One of the same salesmen walked past them and muttered, "If they're not going to buy, they should stop loitering. Makes the place look bad." Dean's hand clenched. He walked over casually, acting like just another shopper, and took a seat not far from the couple. Close enough to hear, not close enough to be obvious. Mr. Harrison finally stood up and approached the front desk again. "Excuse me," he said politely. "We're still interested in the red RAV4 from last week. We brought everything with us today." The man at the desk didn't even look up from his phone. "It's gone." Mrs. Harrison leaned in. "Gone? You said, yeah, it sold yesterday. If you want, I can show you something else. But if not, there's the door." Dean's heart sank. The indifference, the coldness, that car wasn't gone. He'd seen it earlier in the lot. They were lying to get rid of them. He couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and walked to the couple. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I'm also looking at the RAV4. I just saw it on the lot. Red 2022 model, right?" Mr. Harrison nodded, puzzled. Dean turned to the salesman. "So, it's not sold?" The man looked rattled. Yeah, it's still technically available, but it's being prepped for another buyer, probably not worth—" Dean cut him off. "I'd like to test drive it right now." The salesman hesitated. "Are you— Do I look like I'm kidding?" Dean's voice was calm but firm. "And while I'm at it, I want the Harrisons to come with me. Maybe we'll compare notes after the drive." That did it. The color drained from the man's face. Marcus, watching from the side, stepped forward like he'd just found a spark of hope. "I'll get the keys," he said quickly, bypassing the flustered salesman. As the Harrisons followed Dean toward the exit, still confused but quietly grateful, Mrs. Harrison whispered, "Thank you, we didn't expect—" Dean smiled slightly. "You shouldn't have to." He didn't tell them who he was, not yet, but the fire inside him was fully lit. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about decency, and someone was about to be held accountable. The red RAV4 rolled slowly into the parking lot, its engine humming softly under the bright afternoon sun. Dean sat behind the wheel, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison in the back seat, and Marcus riding shotgun. The air inside was a strange mix of tension and hope. Dean kept his tone casual as they drove around the block. "So what draws you to this one?" he asked, glancing at the rearview mirror. Mr. Harrison smiled faintly. "We've been looking for something dependable. Not too big, not too small. This one fits the budget, and I served long enough to know when something's built right." Dean nodded, eyes still on the road. "Well, I can tell you this, it's a solid ride, smooth handling, good mileage. But the experience of buying it? That should be just as dependable, don't you think?" Mrs. Harrison sighed. "We've tried, we brought everything, documents, pre-approval, even offered to put a down payment last week. But your people, they just make us feel like we're not welcome." Dean's grip on the wheel tightened. "I saw that today, and I'm sorry." There was a long pause. Mr. Harrison asked carefully, "You work here, son?" Marcus looked over at Dean, sensing something was coming. Dean pulled back into the dealership lot and parked the car. He turned around in his seat and looked them in the eye. "I do work here. Actually, I own the place." The silence that followed was almost deafening. Mrs. Harrison blinked. "Excuse me?" Dean smiled, though it was tired. "Dean Hargrove, CEO of Road King Motors. I came here today undercover to see how customers are treated. And what I saw with you, it made me ashamed." Marcus looked stunned. "You're the boss?" Dean chuckled. "Yep. I started this whole thing with a rusty pickup and a handshake deal 25 years ago. And somewhere along the way, I guess I lost sight of what matters. He stepped out of the car, holding the keys loosely in his hand. Come with me. You're not leaving here today without the respect you deserve. And the car you came for. Harrisons followed him inside, with Marcus trailing behind. Back in the showroom, the atmosphere had shifted. A few of the smug salesmen were now watching with awkward curiosity. Dean didn't waste time. He walked straight to the middle of the floor and clapped his hands once sharply. Everyone, gather up. The sales team slowly approached, whispering among themselves. One of them, the same guy who'd mocked the Harrisons earlier, looked especially pale. Dean stood in the center, calm but commanding. I'm Dean Hargrove. I own Road King Motors. I've been undercover here today to see how this branch operates. And what I saw, frankly, it disgusts me. You could hear a pin drop. I watched two of my employees mock loyal customers because of their age and the color of their skin. I saw people turned away with lies instead of helped with dignity. And I heard more cowardice in your silence than I did in your laughter. The guilty salesman shifted uncomfortably, looking down. Dean pointed toward Marcus. This man right. Here is the only reason I didn't walk out of here 10 minutes after I arrived. Marcus treated me with respect, never pushed, and actually listened. That's what a real employee looks like. He turned back to the group. As of this moment, 2 of you are suspended pending review. If your behavior today reflects how you treat all customers, your careers here are over. The 2 men, faces, Hale, jaws tight, didn't even try to argue. One opened his mouth, but Dean cut him off with a glance. Dean then turned back to the Harrisons. You'll get the car you came for. No games, no tricks. Marcus will handle everything. And we're covering your first 2 years of maintenance free of charge. It's the least we can do. Mrs. Harrison's eyes welled up. Mr. Harrison just nodded, silently gripping his wife's hand. Dean's voice lowered as he faced the team once more. This place used to stand for honesty, for treating people like people. If you're not on board with that, there's the door. He didn't wait for applause or praise. He just turned and walked toward his office, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking like a CEO trying to grow profits. He was thinking like a man trying to save his soul. The sun had started to dip behind the rooftops when Dean sat down at his office desk, rubbing his temples with slow, tired hands. Outside the glass walls, he watched Marcus escort the Harrisons to the front lot, where the red RAV4 was waiting, detailed, fueled, and ready for its rightful owners. Mr. Harrison held out his hand to Marcus, then hugged him like a brother. Mrs. Harrison wiped her eyes discreetly as she slid into the passenger seat. Dean exhaled deeply. He hadn't realized how far his company had slipped from the values he built it on. Road King Motors had started as a dream in a single garage, helping families find cars they could count on. Somehow, over time, the gleam of success had blinded him to the rust growing in his foundation. A soft knock tapped against his door. It opened before he could answer. Marcus stepped in, holding a folder, his face unreadable. Dean gestured for him to sit. They loved the car, Marcus said, placing the folder gently on the desk. Signed everything. Said it was the first time they ever left a dealership smiling. Dean nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Good. That's how it should be. There was a pause. I didn't know who you were at first, Marcus said, but the way you stood up for them, I should have guessed. Dean looked at him, eyes steady. Why didn't you walk away from this place, Marcus? You had every reason to. Marcus shrugged. Because I figured if everyone who cared walked out, there'd be no one left to fight. Dean sat back, deeply moved. You've got guts. More than most of the people I've hired. Marcus smiled faintly. Just trying to do right. Dean stood and walked around the desk. I want you to do more than that. I'm promoting you to floor manager, effective immediately. Marcus blinked. What? You'll set the tone here from now on. Hiring, training, ethics. If someone doesn't treat a customer the way you treated me or the Harrisons, they're out. Marcus slowly nodded, still processing. Thank you, I won't let you down. I know, Dean replied. As Marcus left, Dean pulled out his laptop and opened a blank memo. He began typing fast, furious. Effective immediately, Road King Motors would be undergoing a full audit of its customer service practices. Diversity training wouldn't just be a checkbox anymore. Mystery shoppers, real ones, would rotate through every branch monthly. And the corporate culture? It was going back to what mattered: empathy, respect, human decency. By the time the last salesman locked up for the night, the mood inside the showroom had changed. The toxic laughter was gone. The fear was real now, replaced by something even stronger: accountability. Dean stood at the glass, arms crossed, watching the emptying lot. It wasn't just about 2 customers who were mistreated. It was about all. The ones he never saw. The ones who'd walked away quietly, disrespected, dismissed, and forgotten. That would never happen again. Not on his watch. As he flicked off the office lights and stepped outside, the evening breeze felt different, cleaner, lighter. He climbed into his truck, not a luxury SUV, but the same one he'd started with all those years ago, and smiled. Tomorrow, the work would begin again, but this time it would be honest. This time it would mean something, and this time he'd be watching, always.